Welcome to the Thyroid Fixer podcast, where we dive deep into the world of thyroid and hormones, especially for you ladies navigating perimenopause and menopause, and really for anyone struggling with hypothyroidism. I'm your host, Dr. Amy, thyroid and hormone specialist and CEO of a global telemedicine practice where we prescribe the right thyroid treatment and bioidentical hormones to all 50 states and most of Canada, helping you become that badass human that you're meant to be. So if you're battling weight gain and hair loss, you can't lose weight no matter what you do, your energy levels are plummeting and your libido left town, then you're in the right place and you have found your tribe. Remember, I want you to embrace every inch of that badass woman that you truly are. So if you're ready to dive in and fix things, let's get started. Are you trying to lose weight? I mean, most of us are, but when you cut calories or you use those new Beverly Hills soccer mom drug of choice for weight loss injectables, you're not going to get in enough protein. And that's the problem. That's where you start losing muscle and fat at the same time. You don't want to lose your sexy lean muscle. So Kion Aminos helps prevent muscle loss. Kion Aminos can help you feel full when you're cutting calories, which that's a bonus. And it's going to help you build that lean muscle for a faster metabolism, a lean, toned, sexy body. So add in Kion Aminos. I do it every single day. I drink them during my workout, and then I'll also drink them throughout the day because that's supporting my muscles, keeping my muscles as I'm just sitting at my desk working. Add in Kion Aminos, try them out. I love the berry, I love the mango, but you're going to love all the flavors. Toss it in your water, shake it up, drink it throughout the day. And then, like I said, definitely during a workout. So you are going to use my link to save 20% off. So that's a no-brainer for you to try these out. You're going to go to getkion.com. That's GETKION.com/thyroid. And that is going to give you 20% off your first order. Let me know what you think. Are you finally at your wit's end where you are tired of dealing with doctor after doctor? Maybe you've spent thousands on integrative or functional practitioners that have not helped you at all because they don't know the thyroid and hormones. They're not even testing properly. So come work with myself and my team. We prescribe to all 50 states and parts of Canada. I have you covered. I've been building this team for years so that I could help you no matter where you are. All you have to do is click the link in the show notes, book a free application call. We're going to go over your current health situation, what worked, what hasn't worked, all the things. And then we will pair you up with the right program for you where we will do it all. You will come out the other side of the program, totally optimized, getting your life back. You're going to recognize the person you see in the mirror again. Doesn't that sound absolutely amazing? Well, it might sound like you don't even believe it, but I promise you, we will take good care of you. So click the link in the show notes, book a call today, and we'll be talking to you soon. If you are struggling at all with fertility, if you are thinking about getting pregnant, if you have had miscarriages, even if you are past childbearing years, you're done, there's still something in here for you. Because the reality is, when we lose our fertility, we age faster, we decline faster, we die faster. And having a fertile body is having a healthy body. You're going to hear stories from Dr. Cleopatra today that are going to blow you away. If you've done IVF, if you've dropped thousands of dollars, if you still are disappointed, if you're very, very frustrated, if you're sad that the one thing you want in life is not happening, then you need to listen to this podcast. Dr. Cleopatra actually lost her mom at birth. And from that point on, she realized that healthy reproduction is everything. She never knew her mother. Every time she celebrates her birthday, she is also on the same day mourning the loss of her mother. So she founded and is the chief scientific officer of the Fertility and Pregnancy Institute and Super Baby Nutrition. She's an NIH-funded scientist, retired tenure University of Southern California professor. And when she was there, she pioneered the field of fertility, biohacking, and creating super babies using her world-renowned Primester protocol. and groundbreaking fertility supplement and prenatal vitamin line, Super Baby Nutraceuticals. So she's been doing this for, oh my gosh, I mean, almost 30 years. She's helped thousands of women on 6 continents and 47 different countries have super babies. And you are going to learn so much from this conversation. It's going to blow you out of the water. So listen up, Dr. Cleopatra. Dr. Cleopatra, I love you so much. I know my audience is going to love you. And I'm just excited to have you on with your vast knowledge on really all things pregnancy and fertility. And that's such a hot topic among women these days, because in my opinion, I believe that, and you can confirm this, I believe we are seeing an increased rate of infertility, decreased rate of births, and really decreased rate of healthy children, increased autism, increased ADD and ADHD, developmental delays left and right. And it's just crazy. And this is something that we need to talk about. We need to educate women before they get pregnant. And there are things that you can do with your health to prime your body for a healthy pregnancy. So I am super excited to have you on today.
I love you too. It's mutual. I love the work that you do in the world. I love the stand that you are for women and for health in general. And the thyroid is just so critical to every other part of health, including fertility and pregnancy, and how we're programming the health of our future children in utero and even before conception and then across the lifespan. So thank you for what you do. And thank you for having me here. And thank you for highlighting this topic, because your hunch is absolutely right. Never has there been a time when fertility and pregnancy and having healthy children has been harder. Never has there been a time when treating people for fertility and healthy pregnancy and having healthy children has been harder. And it's getting harder every year. And people, it's interesting, it's becoming a topic that and a struggle that people out in the world are more aware of. Mm-hmm. And that people are more fearful of because they're becoming more aware of it. So there are data that show that somewhere between 75 and 91% of millennial women are fearful about their fertility long before they are even thinking about having children. And I think it's because people can see with their own eyes just how much of a problem this is becoming. And people have a lot of anxiety about it. And what's really interesting is that in some ways, it can feel like it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for people who have a lot of anxiety about it. And we can talk more about that. There are personality components, and is just the impact of more anxiety on the fertility and pregnancy system. So it's a very intricate, complex picture, but I think we can start to dissect pieces of it for those listening to us today and give them some really practical tools that they can start implementing when they know they want to be a mom one day or a parent one day in the future, when they're close to being ready, when they've been ready and it's not happening for them, when they're already pregnant and beyond.
So what would you say, in your opinion and in your experience, is the cause of this lowered fertility? I mean, we're seeing so much more infertility and, just like you said, issues before, during, and even after pregnancy. What's the root cause?
I can tell you in one overarching explanation, and then there are a lot of pieces or pathways that go into that. So what it is that there's this incredible mismatch between the world that our reproductive biology evolved to function and thrive in and the world that we live in today. And that mismatch, that gap is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. I have goosebumps. I mean, I think about this constantly. I talk about this constantly, and still it gives me goosebumps just how serious this situation is. So that mismatch is becoming bigger and bigger, and that's accounting for the increased rates of fertility challenges or infertility. we don't use the word infertility at the Fertility and Pregnancy Institute because we know that most people and most human beings are not truly infertile or sterile. But most people are experiencing fertility challenges that are temporary and that can be overcome. So that's why we use fertility challenges instead of infertility. But I'm going to come back to some infertility data as they're described in the scientific literature.
Mhm.
So that's why we're seeing these increased rates of fertility challenges. We're seeing increased rates of miscarriage. And I can share with some really shocking and eye-opening data about miscarriage and pregnancy loss, and also the role of dads and the role of sperm, because I don't think that we pay enough attention to that. And then this same mismatch is what's accounting for this programming of poor health in future children during the primester, which is that period of time leading up to conception, during the prenatal period, which is pregnancy, and then during birth and early childhood. That mismatch is also contributing to the higher rates of autism and autism spectrum disorders, as well as other neurocognitive challenges, and also broader mental and physical health challenges. So here's a really startling piece of information that everybody needs to hear.
Mhm.
Almost 1 out of every 2 children today has a chronic mental or physical health condition.
Wow.
Like
Wow.
the
I
goosebumps
do. I have
again.
goosebumps. I have
Yeah,
goosebumps.
yes. Well, and Dr. Amy, you and your husband live this every day in a really profound and difficult way. And I get teary just thinking about the story that you talked about in our Super Fertility Summit session, which we'll tell you all about the Super Fertility Summit in case you want a deep dive into what you can do to have healthy fertility and pregnancy and make your super babies. But you live this in such a profound way, and it's so painful. And here's the thing, even if you're not expecting to have fertility challenges or pregnancy complications, even if you're not worried about your age and you expect everything to go well, that endpoint of 1 out of 2 children having a chronic mental or physical health condition is enough to have you pause,
Yeah.
or should be enough to have you pause and say, I am going to do everything in my power to primester, to prime my brain, my body, my ovaries, my follicles, which will produce my eggs, my partner's sperm, if I have a male partner, to epigenetically program the very best possible health for the children we will be creating in the future. That's what we call our super babies.
Mhm.
And even if you don't expect to have any challenges, please do that just so that you get to have the beautiful experience of you envision having. And Dr. Amy, you guys know more than anyone how painful it is when you don't get to have that. And so that you get to have children whose biggest problem in life is to decide how big do they want to dream, how big do they want to live.
Yeah.
And I actually took those words directly from one of our mamas who gave birth to super baby boy Laith recently, and she had many miscarriages, and she had very low AMH levels, problems with egg quality. And she primestered, she had her super baby boy, and the day she sent me his pictures to say he had arrived, she said, my prayer is that he's like your super babies. And his biggest problem in life is, how big do I get to dream? How big of a life do I want to live? And that's really all any of us want for our children. If we want to have children, if we want to be parents, all we want is for them to have every chance at the most beautiful life possible. We want them to have everything we never had, and for them to be able to use their gifts and their talents and live out their dreams. And I'm so blessed. I have 3 super babies. By the way, I just turned 46 and a couple of days ago, and I conceived each of them on the first try in my late 30s and 40s. I have given birth to the most athletic, smart, kind, happy, well-adjusted, socially capable children, some of the most I've ever encountered in my life.
Oh.
And I'm not special. I'm not special. I primestered and I poured so deeply and lovingly into these humans, but when they were just a spark in my imagination, because I wanted them to have everything I never had. I lost my mother at birth. My beautiful young mother was only 27 years old when she gave birth and lost her life the day I was born. And so I just had my birthday. I've outlived her now by almost 2 decades. And as much as I celebrate my birthday, and I love getting older because my life has become, it gets more and more beautiful and wonderful as I get older. My birthday also marks her death. And so it's really hard. But what I've decided a long time ago was that I was going to treat every day of my life like treasure. And that when I was 5 years old, I was so clear that reproduction is the most important thing in the world because it sets the stage for everything else that comes after it. And its impact never goes away across generations, across your lineage. And so I knew that this was what I was here to do. At 18 years and 2 months old, I went into a pregnancy laboratory at the University of Miami. I went on to, all the best institutions and got the most incredible interdisciplinary training to create what is now known as the Primester protocol and our supporting super baby nutraceuticals. But the point is that commitment is the ultimatum when it comes to fertility and pregnancy and parenting. It really is. Like, it's easier to just say, well, can't we just have sex and get pregnant like everybody else does?
Right.
Or can't we just do IVF if we're having trouble? But IVF doesn't address your raw material. Only you can do that. And you need to be addressing that raw material because that raw material is what's going to create your humans, your family. And you've got to do that. And you've got to do that in at least 120 days leading up to conception, the primester. That's when you have all the leverage. If you're worried about your age, that's where you get to slow and reverse your biological clock, literally slow and reverse your biological age. That's where your leverage is. And even if you're not worried about your age, most people are weathering and aging well beyond their years, which is due to this mismatch that I talked about in the very beginning. So we've got to be doing this work in advance. And I always say you're the mama bear. You are the mama bear long before you have your super babies because they've been with you as follicles in your ovaries since you were a 20-week-old fetus in your mother's womb. They know you better than anyone in the world. They've been eavesdropping on every thought, every emotion you've had, every experience you've had, because every thought, every emotion, every experience has a biochemical underpinning that's affecting them. And so you really got to start living as the mama bear who will do anything and everything for your super babies long before you're ready to have them. And especially when you start getting serious about having them in the, even the year leading up would be ideal, but at least 120 days. And you need, if you have a partner and that partner is providing DNA and the epigenome as well through sperm, then you need your partner to contribute to that as well.
Oh my gosh. You blew my mind on so many different fronts. How do you not love this woman? Honestly, like your stories give me chills. So where I want to go next is that trimester, which I have never heard that term, but as you're speaking, alarms are going off in my head because obviously, just like you had mentioned, I openly share the story of my stepson who is 12 years old, nonverbal, autistic, severely developmentally delayed. And as much as we pray and we hope and we try, realistically, he will never operate on his own. He won't ever play a sport. He's never called my husband dad. He barely interacts. There's just not much there. There's no real strong future, whether you like it or not. And I will tell everyone very openly that it is a living hell. As much as he is a joy, he is an angel. He brings joy to everyone that sees him and interacts with him. It is a hell for the parents, and especially my husband, because that's a boy. He had these dreams of taking him hunting and playing sports like he did, or just a basic conversation, be able to play some video games or something, and it's not there. So if we can help one woman avoid that, it is 100% worth it. And when you say Primester, I know the mom enough, and I've shared this on the summit, that when I look at mom, I see fluctuating weight, I see a swollen neck, I see hypothyroidism. Now, prior to that, I also know her lifestyle, and I know how she eats, and I know she was a drinker, and I know that there was no priming in the Primester whatsoever. Had multiple miscarriages, had to abort a baby because of triploid syndrome, and then finally got pregnant with Bodhi. So to me, those miscarriages and the triploid were big red flags from her body saying, you need to do something with what's inside of you. And maybe it was the genetics, and maybe, my husband blames it on the medication they put her on for a short cervix. Possibly, absolutely possibly. But again, looking at the Primester, like you're saying, I believe was vital in her experiences of pregnancy.
Absolutely. And you're right. Those were all warning signs. And I want to come back to that. But let me just put this in a little bit of context. First of all, it's so devastating, even when you've heard the story before, even you're living it every day. It's absolutely devastating. And this is not a rarity anymore. The most recent data are that 1 out of 35 children is autistic, or is it 1 out of 33? I should have looked that up right before coming, but it's somewhere between
Yeah.
And then get this, it's more likely in boys, such that 1 out of 25 boys is autistic.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got a massive problem on our hands. That's not including the full autism spectrum. That's not including ADHD and other neurocognitive disorders, which are incredibly common, learning problems, all the things. Okay. But let's speak into this. Well, what was it? Maybe it was the medication. Maybe it was genetics. Let's talk about that. Yeah. So we know that autism has a heredity component, which means it's genetic to some degree. However, it is 65% epigenetic and only 35% genetic. What that means for us is that this is great news, because we have the ability to shape and affect that 65%. If it were the other way around, we'd be rolling dice a lot more, and it'd be a lot more scary. So the good news is that most cases of autism can be prevented. And that is beautiful. Even if you have a genetic risk, most cases of autism can be prevented. We have a lot of people who come to us now who have a child who's autistic or has other special needs, and they want to have another child, but they're so terrified because they want their child to be well. Like you said, they love their child no matter what special needs they have. Just like you say, he brings so much joy, and it's not what they expected, and it's hard, and it's terrifying to think about what happens to them when they're no longer here, and all the things that they'll never get to have the normal and beautiful experiences of life, right?
Right.
And I can think of this one couple who had an autistic son, and then they were so overwhelmed with figuring out how to take care of him. And then at the same time, the mom stopped having her period for 6 years. So by the time they felt ready to have another child, she hadn't had her period for 6 years. And she also had an AMH level of 0.03, which is essentially zero. And AMH is anti-Müllerian hormone, which is the one measure that will always be taken to get a sense of your ovarian reserve. So essentially, she had an ovarian reserve of 0. And because she hadn't been cycling for 6 years, she was in early menopause. So she went to multiple IVF clinics, and they all said the same thing. Like, this is not happening for you. You've got nothing going on here. You have no eggs to work with. This is not happening. And So she found out about the Primester. So the Primester, that period of time leading up to conception, we leverage our epigenetic foundation for our fertility, but for also for making our super babies. And we use the Primester protocol to do that. They found out about the Primester. They came to Primester. She brought her AMH level back up into a normal range in the 120-day Primester, which the doctors she went back to said, this is not humanly possible. This is a marvel of modern medicine. Like, no, but we see this happening every single day at FPI in the Primester protocol. So that's number one. But number two, she got pregnant on the first try. And she got pregnant. She got pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl, fraternal twins. And get this, because their older brother is autistic, they were recruited into a neuroscience study at UCLA, and they were followed for, they're still being followed, but for the first year of their lives. And the neuroscientist said there is something so special in the best way about these super babies and their brains. And she says it's their Primester super babies. That's why. And they came because they needed help with fertility, and they were told they had zero chance, and they were turned away from the IVF clinics unless they were willing to use egg donors. But once they started primestering, they realized they had done such an important thing, because they were also very much reducing the risk that the next child, which ended up being two children, would be autistic as well, like their older brother. And then they love him so much. I always hear them say, he's so rad, he's so awesome. And it's hard. It's hard to parent an autistic child. It's hard to be an autistic person when the world is not set up for you. And this is just one thing that we're talking about. There are some eczema, asthma, allergies. I mean, thyroid disorders. I mean, the list goes on and on, other autoimmune disorders. So we've really got to be doing that work in the Primester, that period of time leading up to conception. And the beautiful thing is, just like autism, almost every health condition is far more epigenetic than it is genetic, which is the good news, because we have the power to shape our epigenetics, which is how our genes express themselves. We can never change the genes that we were born with. We'll always have those. We'll always have the genetic risks and vulnerabilities that we were born with. But the good news is that through our inputs, we can dial down those risks and vulnerabilities. And that's what we're doing when we're reducing the risk of autism. We're reducing the risk of fertility challenges. We're reducing the risk of pregnancy complications, of miscarriage, etc. So this is really important to know, that there is that heredity component, but the epigenetic component is so much greater, which means that we have a lot of ability to shape outcomes.
Okay, this is me literally just speaking to you from the heart. So many of you know I've been where you are with the struggle of weight gain, unexplained. Literally, you're doing everything you can and nothing is working. And I've been in the boat of crushing fatigue, like the type of fatigue you can't explain to anyone unless they've gone through it. The hair loss, legit, when you're counting the hairs that fall out of your head. I get that because I've been there. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. That's why it's my passion to help you specifically get to where you deserve to be, get to optimization land, which I always joke about being in. But it's not really a joke. It's a place. It's a place of existence in your life where you can enjoy life. You can go out with your friends. You can have a glass of wine. You're not gaining weight looking sideways at a brownie. You have energy to get through the day. You don't even think about being tired because you're not tired. You're just confident. You're confident in your own body. You're confident in your own skin. And beyond that, you're out of that frustrating cycle of doctor jumping, thinking that maybe this one will listen to me. Maybe this one will actually do what they're supposed to do. And then you're disappointed again and you're crying in your car like I was. So that is why it's literally been my mission. And I've been working on this for years and finally got here to help every single person in every single state and some of Canada. So we can now prescribe to all 50 states. And the reason why this is important is because if you have low thyroid function and you have low hormones, there is no supplement, there's no diet, there's no lifestyle change that you can do to build those hormones back up. And I flat out call BS on any program out there that promises you optimization without actually using bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, including thyroid hormone replacement. If you're not making hormones properly, you're not making hormones properly, and we have to replace that. Now, many of you are in the process of begging your doctor for bioidentical hormones that they're uneducated on. They tell you scary things that just, don't believe them. And many of you are trying to beg your doctor to give you the right thyroid medication. Well, you can stop that now too, because we can order all the labs, prescribe all the bioidentical hormones, all the thyroid medication, all the things. We can do that to all 50 states and most of Canada. Now, when you work with me, when you work with my team, you're getting personalized plans, personalized treatment plans, personalized nutrition, the whole deal, top to bottom. You get what you need to get to the finish line, to enjoy your life, to live with me in optimization land, which is where you deserve to be. You deserve that. So click the link in the show notes, book a free call. We're going to go over everything with you. You don't have to remember everything I just said. The one thing you have to remember is I've been there. I can help you. I promise you're not that tough of a case. And it doesn't matter where you live in the United States and parts of Canada, we can help you. Oh my gosh, I love that. And I think we're seeing that across the board with a variety of different diseases, from cancer to Alzheimer's, that epigenetics is really coming to the forefront, and it's less about genetics. Just like you said, it still plays that maybe 30 to 35% role, but the rest is how we live. So can you give an example as you're talking about Primester? What are the things that women are doing incorrectly in that time leading up to conception that can obviously affect everything that we just talked about?
Okay, so our fertility and pregnancy system is a complex network. Like, think about the neural network in the brain, or when you see commercials about the cell phone network, it's like that. But we use the fertility and pregnancy pyramid as shorthand to represent that very complex network. And it has 5 levels. I'm just going to run through them really quickly, and I'm going to focus on the base of the pyramid, which most people don't think about. So at the base is the psychosexual level. This has to do with our psychology, our sensuality, our sexuality. Then the bioecological level. This is our physiology. This is the ecological context. This is the level that most people are focused on if they're thinking about their fertility, but they're thinking about this level in a very narrow way compared to the way that we address it and conceptualize it. Okay. Then you have the neuroimmunological level. So this has to do with the brain, the immune system, autoimmunity. And then you have the culture, the social and the cultural levels, which nobody is thinking about the base or those top 2 levels at all. We're the only place in the world addressing those, but also those other 2 levels, the conceptualization is very, very narrow. So I want to talk about the base because it doesn't matter what you've got going on. You can have been diagnosed with low AMH, early menopause, poor egg quality, poor sperm quality or sperm count. And of course, we're going to be addressing those things at all the other levels, but the answer, the key, the unlock is always at the psychosexual level. It's completely fascinating because it is the foundation for all of the other levels and because it runs throughout all of them. And I want to give you a couple very specific examples. Mm-hmm. So let me just explain that there are these very intricate feedback loops between our psychology and our fertility, and they run through the central nervous system and the HPA axis in particular, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenocortical axis. You can add the thyroid and the ovaries or the gonads to that axis as well, because they're all on the same axis. Mm-hmm. And that's our body's stress response system. And it really affects our sex hormones, our stress hormones, and everything that goes into our fertility. So that's really the place where these feedback loops are happening. And we talk about the top 3 epigenetic inputs. So going back to your question of what are the things that people are doing wrong? Well, let's start with the top 3 epigenetic inputs to the fertility and pregnancy system. Number 1 is our thoughts and our broader psychological hygiene and habits. Now, most people are not thinking about that when they're thinking about their fertility, even though most people would say, if they looked at it, my thoughts are a disaster if I'm having problems getting pregnant or staying pregnant or having a healthy child. And so again, that's at the psychosexual level. And here's the thing. We have somewhere between 6,500 and 80,000 thoughts a day as humans. That's a huge range. And there's a lot of disagreement in the scientific community where we fall in that range. But wherever we fall, we're having a lot of thoughts every day. And about 80% of those are recurring thoughts and negative thoughts about ourselves, our lives, our place in the world, how we compare to others, all the things, right?
Right.
The things that we've been struggling with on repeat in our lives, the habits we're having trouble breaking, all those things. Well, the reason why thoughts are the number 1 epigenetic input is just due to the sheer frequency of exposure. We are constantly being exposed to our own thoughts and broader psychological hygiene and habits. And they have, as I mentioned earlier, a biochemical underpinning that's constantly sending signals to the brain, the body, the ovaries, the follicles, our future babies who are already in there. I call them our 7th sense because, like I said, they know us better than anyone. They've been experiencing everything with us. And if somebody taught us that when we were young, we would be like, well, maybe this experience isn't worth having. Maybe this person isn't worth sleeping with and having inside of my body, right? The space that's going to carry my baby in the future. But that's a whole other conversation about how we really need to be educating young people much, much, much earlier in life about fertility. I mean, education, health education is really failing us on so many levels, including the fact that it's like completely ignore and suppress your fertility until one day you decide you want it. And then you're just going to expect it to be there working well for you. Well, that's not really how it works. But also, if somebody could really show us how much these future humans would mean to us who were already carrying with us, we'd probably respect ourselves more. We'd probably understand our worth and our value earlier. We'd probably make different decisions. I mean, I was so boy crazy when I was young. Thankfully, I was working my butt off from the time that I was very young. I was in the lab. Otherwise, I would have been running around with boys like crazy because I was so attracted to them. They were so attracted to me. And it was just out of control. If I hadn't been so focused and dedicated, man, would I have been causing some trouble out there. So, and it would have been trouble for me and my future super babies. You know what I mean? So thank God. But anyway, it's really, really important that we understand the impact of every thought we have and how it sends these signals, and it's constantly sending signals to the brain, the body, the ovaries, our future super babies about our safety and our survival and how safe we are in this moment, how safe it is to reproduce in this time, if there are threats to our survival. And if the body and brain and ovaries are perceiving threats to our safety and survival, they're saying, oh, this is not a good time to reproduce. This is not a good time to ovulate. This is not a good time to get pregnant. This is not a good time to stay pregnant. This is not a good time to grow a whole other human for 10 months, not 9 months, by the way, 10 months, and then birth them and then breastfeed them and then spend, the rest of our lives raising them. So we have to be sending signals of safety with the thoughts that we're thinking, but most of us are a complete disaster on the inside. When we talk about stress, we look to the outside world and the things that are happening around us, our work, our relationships, traffic, this and that. But if people really got honest with themselves, they would see, if they paid attention, that the greatest source of stress is what's happening in here, and how their thoughts about what's happening around them are unfolding and what that looks like for them on a day-to-day basis. But it's not just thoughts. When I talk about broader psychological hygiene and habits, let me tell you something really mind-blowing. Over the course of the last decade or so, I have been identifying what I now refer to as an infertile personality type. I call this our inner Erica Kane because I try to make it concrete. And what's really important about this is that many of us are operating in very masculine worlds and domains where we've had to figure out as women how to survive and succeed in those worlds. And in the process of doing that, we have started to adopt certain characteristics and qualities that maybe are more characteristically masculine and that are more type A. And those of us who are really driven, it's really easy for that to happen, right? So very, very ambitious, very competitive, undertones of hostility and time pressure. All of these things these things are all linked to a greater likelihood of having fertility challenges and of being unable to succeed in fertility treatment and having pregnancy complications. And, for a long time, I was very afraid to share about this because I think it sounds controversial at first glance because it sounds like you're blaming people. And what I want to say is that there's no blame. First of all, we need a full array of people and personalities for the world to go around. But on top of that, we all have had to respond to the world that we live in and adapt to the world that we live in. And we're not wrong for adapting in the ways that make us more likely to survive and succeed in male-dominated domains, medicine, science, marketing, law, whatever it may be. And in fact, female lawyers, female doctors, academic women all have some of the highest rates of fertility challenges. And they also have high rates of these personality characteristics that really make up the infertile personality type. And so I think that we have to, as much as I was afraid to talk about this, we have to talk about this because we have to ask ourselves, do I want to be this person? If I consciously want to be this person, then great, be that person. But if I don't want to consciously be that person, but I've become that person because of the environments in which I operate or because I felt like I had no other choice, then that's a different story. And we can start making different decisions so that we can be the parents we want to be. And I think that for a lot of women who are struggling to get pregnant, stay pregnant, and have healthy children, this is a key to the puzzle that's really been missing for them, that nobody has said to them that who you are being to yourself and in the world and in your relationships fundamentally gets to change in service of having your healthiest fertility and being available to be the mom and the woman you want to be.
Wow, that is so powerful, girl. Oh my gosh, I never even thought about that, but you are 100% right. And it's almost like women have been forced to shift because nowadays you can't live without two incomes in the family. So the women are either starting their own business, being entrepreneurs, which you have to take on that masculine role to run a company, or they're fighting their way through corporate and they're being pushed down and not paid the same as men. And so they're just battling and they have to put on their man pants in order to make it in the world and bring home food for their family. But that pulls them apart into a dual role, essentially. That makes complete sense.
You're 100% correct about this. And when you say the dual role, the first thing that comes to mind is I always say we need all of us to our whole self to make and grow and raise our super babies, which means we need both our masculine and feminine parts. But we've become it's almost like we lean so much toward the masculine because we have to do these things. And you're right, female entrepreneurs are also in that same group of people who tend to have these characteristics and have higher rates of fertility challenges and pregnancy complications in some cases. And here's the thing, like I grew up so poor, and I've been working my butt off my entire life. And I haven't stopped. And I didn't stop in the primester, pregnancy, postpartum. I was on the tenure track. When I got tenure at the University of Southern California, by the way, I was the first woman of color in history on the tenure track in the school where I started at USC. So you can imagine that was not for the faint of heart in any way whatsoever. So it doesn't mean that you have to back down from the things that you want to do, the things you dream of doing, and also the things you have to do out of necessity. I think what it is really digging into our resilience. And the resilience is I get to I get to have that hunger and go after the things that I want to go after and make the contributions in the world that I want to make. And I get to do it from a place of being a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more playful, having a lot of appreciation and gratitude, still leading with my love, still having the soft edges that I want to have as a woman, maybe a wife, a partner, a mama, and not that like forcing, like that pushing, pulling, fighting. And I think that's the difference. It's not so much what we do, but it's who we're being as we're doing it. And I think that we get to make a deliberate decision about who we're being as we're doing those things so that we don't have to damage our fertility in the process. And I think it's such a beautiful training. That's one of the other things about the Primester is it's this incredible training ground for parenting your super babies. That is really the masculine and feminine parts of being a mama, of being a parent. You're the mama bear, you're the mama wolf, you're the mama lion, and you are that really soft place to land. And you have to offer that soft place to land to yourself and have that inside of you as well in order to be able to offer that to them.
Yes, absolutely. Now, of course, in the context of this podcast, I have to ask you, how important is thyroid and hormone balance? Where does that fit in the pyramid? And at what point do you really start addressing that? Obviously, it's in the Primester, correct?
Yes. Okay. So the thyroid is critical. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that the thyroid affects everything else, but it has such a profound impact on fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, the programming of the health of your future children in the Primester and also in utero. We call this fetal programming or perinatal programming. So first of all, your thyroid has to be functioning properly in order to have a regular menstrual cycle and to ovulate regularly. So both hypo and hyperthyroidism, as well as Hashimoto's or autoimmune thyroid disorder, can disrupt the menstrual cycle and can disrupt ovulation. So both hypo and hyper can make it so that menstrual cycles are longer and periods become spread farther apart. But usually with hypo, you'll see heavier periods and you'll see longer periods or longer bleeding. With hyperthyroidism, you might see thinner periods and shorter periods or bleeding. But again, the menstrual cycle is getting longer than what's considered to be normal, which is somewhere between 21 and 35 days, and really probably more ideally between 25 and 30 days. And so that's really important. And if you're somebody who is tracking your basal body temperature and you're seeing that your temperature is lower than it should be, that's a really good indication that you have hypothyroidism. Mm-hmm. And if it's higher than expected, that could be an indication of hyperthyroidism. And in both cases, you might also see the temperature spike not be as reliable or pronounced. So if you're charting your temperature and you're seeing weird things with your temperature, one of the first places to look is your thyroid. You've got to be ovulating regularly and to be regulating your menstrual cycle, because it is the vital sign that's telling you what's happening with the underlying hormones and the dance of the hormones over the course of the menstrual cycle. And that dance and the ratios among the hormones has to be working correctly in order to ovulate, in order to be able to get pregnant, allow for implantation, and allow for a pregnancy to progress. So it's absolutely critical. And then, so you've got to make sure you've stabilized in the primester in that 120 days leading up to conception. And don't let your doctor only measure your TSH. And I know you you say this like every day, right?
Right.
Because you're
But it bears repeating, because so many women just get sucked into that whole, okay, whatever my doctor's testing, he says I'm okay, I'm just going to believe him.
Absolutely. And you've got to be, so one of the things that we teach about in the Primester protocol is allied advocacy. You've got to be your own health advocate, but you want to treat this, you want to approach it from a place of allyship, not antagonistically. So you don't want to go in and say, I need you to do this and you're not doing this. What's that saying? Like, bees are more attracted to honey than vinegar. And I don't know if that was exactly right, but it's like that, right? You go in and you say, I know you care about me. I know you want me to be successful. And with all the ways that I'm educating myself, I'm really clear that I need to look at these things. So can you do that for me? And that's the way that you advocate from yourself. By the way, you do the same thing when you're going to give birth in your birth preferences. And anybody can email us and get an example of birth preferences, like your birth plan and what you're asking of the people who are going to be taking care of you. Same kind of thing, but really at every stage. So you cannot just be looking at TSH. Number one, they're going to tell you your TSH is fine, even if it's not within optimal range for fertility. And for fertility, we want to see a TSH between 1 and 2, but much closer to 1 is ideal. Okay. So that's the first thing. But on top of that, you need a full thyroid panel, and you especially need to see, are there any antibodies present? And then if you get them to run antibodies, they might say, well, they're fine. You haven't reached the threshold, but any being present is probably an indication that something's going on. And what's interesting with autoimmune thyroid disorder is that it complicates the picture even further, because it's not just about having too little or too much thyroid hormone, which in and of itself has profound implications for getting pregnant, staying pregnant, and that fetal programming, and making sure that your baby is neurocognitively well and well otherwise, as we've seen in the example with your stepson. But then on top of that, you have the issue of an overactive, hypervigilant immune system, which is, if you're experiencing autoimmune thyroid condition like Hashimoto's, which I believe over 90% of hypothyroid cases are Hashimoto's. Is that number correct? 92%?
It's right up there. Exactly.
Something like that. Okay. So this is really critical. I can't tell you how many times we've had mamas come to Primester and they've been told that their thyroids are fine when we teach them about the full thyroid panel and other types of fertility and pregnancy testing that we recommend. That's a much broader, different picture than anyone's looking at for fertility. Then they learn that they actually have Hashimoto's, and it has to be under control, because it's going to be very challenging to program your healthiest fertility and your healthiest baby with that level of inflammation and immune activation. And then there's always the risk that the immune system is attacking the developing baby, could attack the placenta. So the antibodies can cross the placenta, which also can have lifelong implications for metabolic programming. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that what's happening in the primester and in utero programs your child's health for the rest of their life, their own fertility, the immune health they'll have, digestive health they'll have, the mental health they'll have, and also the longevity potential they will have. So we can't, it's going back to the beginning, even if you're not expecting to have any challenges, we're not just going to have sex and get pregnant, because we're not going to do what everybody else is doing, because look at the result of what everybody else is doing. 1 out of 2 children almost has a chronic mental or physical, it's just under 50%, which is why I say almost 1 out of 2 has a chronic mental or physical health condition, neurocognitive condition. We cannot do what everybody else is doing, like be abnormal, because what is considered normal today is not normal. It's just normative, meaning it's what people are doing on average, but we don't want any part of that for ourselves or for our children. So there are very important considerations for fertility when it comes to the thyroid, but then also in utero, your baby needs your thyroid hormone. And if there's not enough of it or too much of it, that's a problem as well. There are risks for problems with the placenta. There's risk for miscarriage. People who are suffering from repeated or recurrent miscarriage need to be looking at their thyroid in a very intricate way. Also, looking at other things that people don't even know about, like homocysteine levels and the homocysteine in follicular fluid and sperm, et cetera. There's a lot that goes into that, but people have to be looking at the thyroid, have to be sure that there's the right amount of thyroid hormone. And remember that during pregnancy, thyroid needs can be shifting very rapidly. So we have 5 to 7 tests that we recommend that people get the second they get their positive pregnancy test. And one of them is a full thyroid panel. Obviously, that's not just one test, but we count it as one in the list, the full thyroid panel. Mm-hmm. So you want to do that as soon as you get your positive pregnancy test, but you repeat it every 4 weeks. I know that sounds like a lot, but because the needs are shifting so rapidly, you've got to be on top of it, because there can be risk of intrauterine growth restriction, meaning the baby is not growing properly, preterm birth, so many other things that could go wrong with the pregnancy, not to mention how the baby's being programmed for later. Now, when it comes, so that's fertility, that's pregnancy, and the intergenerational programming, or the programming in the primester and in the in utero stage of future health and development potential. Now, in the postpartum period, there's a whole other set of considerations for the mama, because she's going through one of the most rapid hormone reorganizations she will ever go through. And the thyroid is often affected. Even if you didn't have a thyroid condition before, you can end up having one. And we think that some percentage of postpartum depression, anxiety, and psychosis has to do with the thyroid. So if you've got the blues, if you're feeling depressed, if you're having really bad anxiety, if you are having trouble bonding, you're kind of losing yourself, then one of the first things you can do is go get a battery of tests, look at progesterone levels, but also look at your full thyroid panel.
Yes, 100%. Because you always hear this postpartum thyroiditis. And I actually have a podcast on it where I go, it's not postpartum thyroiditis, it's Hashimoto's. It's because you just went through the biggest hormonal stressor you could ever go through. So thank you for saying exactly what I say. And that stressor, albeit a natural stressor, we were built to have babies, still a stressor on the body, flips that Hashimoto's switch into the on position. So it's not like this is postpartum thyroiditis, like it's going to go away someday. You have Hashimoto's that needs to be addressed now.
That's right. And what you just gave the example of is the diathesis stress model, which is basically epigenetics at work, right? So you have a genetic vulnerability and you have a life event that brings that genetic vulnerability to the surface. But the good news is that you can bring in the protective resources to get it under control. And that also, that's exactly what I was talking about dialing up our genetic strengths and privileges and bringing in protective resources and dialing down our genetic risks and vulnerabilities. And you're right, major life stressors, physiological, psychological, or otherwise, often can trigger these genetic vulnerabilities that we have. And because giving birth is such an incredible change hormonally and otherwise, it can be a source of this. And you said something really important, which I want to underscore, which is that even though it's a natural stressor in that we were designed to do this, which is true, except we weren't designed to do it under the conditions that we do it today. And that goes back to that modern world reproductive biology mismatch. We weren't designed to give birth and go back to work a week or 2 weeks later and not be able to breastfeed our babies around the clock. We weren't designed to be under massive financial stress by deciding to take any amount of time off with our babies. Can you imagine giving birth under such incredible financial stress and, you know, being in your postpartum, what should be your postpartum love cocoon, as we call it, and yet you know, you're so stressed out on top of all the other physiological changes and identity changes and lifestyle changes and relationship changes and all the things that you're going through. We weren't meant to do it alone in isolation without multiple generations there, without a community of support there. We weren't meant to do it with constant social comparison of people's highlight reels while we're sitting there and we have a, you know, our belly and our boobs are, you know, all like engorged and we're sweating and you know what I mean? So yes, it is a natural stressor, but we were not designed or intended to do it the way that we do it now.
Right. Very good point. Excellent point. And and then there's the environmental onslaught with that's a whole other topic, putting stress on the body. Oh my God. We could seriously talk for about another 4 hours.
Totally.
So I could
100%. And also those environmental and chemical stressors, those are at the bioecological level. And that's why I said that's kind of the level that people think about more. Well, I shouldn't be drinking out of plastic bottles. I should try to reduce my exposure to glyphosate. Well, if people know to do those things, right? By the way, the use of glyphosate has a strong correlation with growth in autism rates, just FYI, as well as growth in Alzheimer's. We didn't even talk about, you know, blood sugar, type 2 diabetes, type 3 diabetes. Well, by the way, I call fertility challenges type F diabetes because that same constellation of symptoms is showing up, creating trouble getting and staying pregnant, also then puts you at risk for type 2 diabetes in your 40s, type 3 diabetes, Alzheimer's in your 60s. And so let's maybe end on this note, which is that and maybe we should have said this in the beginning, even if you're not interested in having children, or you've already had your children and you're not thinking about fertility anymore, people who preserve their fertility longer live longer on average, and people who struggle with menstrual cycles and fertility are at greater risk for a whole host of other problems, including cardiometabolic disorders and diseases, Alzheimer's, cancer, and early death. And this is not just females, this is males too, because the reproductive system is the first system in the body to age. And so an accelerated wear and tear on and aging of the reproductive system is a very strong indication that you have a lot of other problems coming down the pipeline from that accelerated wear and tear and accelerated aging that's going to start showing up in your cardiovascular system, your brain health, et cetera. Okay. Yes. So this is not just for females who we think about having a biological clock more. This is for women and men, people of all genders. And another thing to know is that utilizing IVF has been linked to possible increased risk of cancers and adverse outcomes in offspring, including autism. Now, probably some component of that is that there's that accelerated aging and wear and tear that was going to increased risk for those things in the future, but
Right.
it may be that those interventions also act as a stressor that sets off those genetic vulnerabilities or increases risk through other pathways. That's not saying if you need them, be afraid of them, but you've got to do your work so that you reduce the number of times you need IV, the number of cycles you need, the amount of intervention, etc. Really, the bottom line here is that we cannot outsource our fertility, and we shouldn't even try, because if we do that and we circumvent the underlying root causes and problems, there are a lot of other problems waiting, including possible problems with the child, pregnancy, possible problems with the child, possible problems with health down the road. And just to show you the beautiful side of this, what's possible is that we know that women centenarians were 4 times more likely to have had children in their 40s, because the same slower biological aging that allowed them to stay fertile longer is allowing them to live longer. So that's a beautiful thing to strive for, whether you want your super babies now or in the future, or you're finished having your children.
Absolutely. I love that message. That's 100%, because that brings in all ladies. It doesn't mean that you have to be in your fertile years and wanting a child to do this primester priming. And
That's right.
like I said, we could talk for 4 more hours, but this is exactly where the summit comes in. You had me as a guest on the summit as well. Can you tell people about that so they can dive into so much more information, because you had a boatload of experts, tons of knowledge just being poured out, and we're going to have that link in the show notes. But tell people about the summit.
I'm so excited for this resource to be available. I couldn't be more proud of how it came out. It's the Super Fertility Summit, and it's available and free until July 29th. And just like a spoiler, we will have, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but I'm going to say this to your audience. We will have an encore weekend, Friday, August 1st, Saturday the 2nd, and Sunday the 3rd. I believe those dates are correct. But so whenever you're hearing this, get in there. And it doesn't matter if you want to have children in the future, you've been struggling and you need answers now and nothing has worked for you, you especially, please run there. But also, if you're starting to experience perimenopausal or menopausal symptoms and life is feeling really hard and you need some strategies for slowing your and reversing your reproductive aging for your quality of life, for your longevity, go there. I already told you about this complex network. Well, everything you could possibly think of that you never knew was part of your reproductive health is covered for you there. And these conversations, these sessions are raw, they are real, they are honest, they are heartfelt, they will surprise you, they will shock you, and they will uplift you and give you hope. They will snap you back into the beauty of this one incredible life that you have right now and really soaking it up on your way to your super baby. And what I wanted for this summit more than anything was for it to be disruptive in the best way possible. I wanted people to come and be so mind blown, not to hear the same crap they hear all the time that they can Google, to hear things they have never heard before, that they didn't even know they needed to ask these questions. And that's what we got. That's how it came out. And the caliber of experts, 43 experts in addition to myself. And I do a bunch of mini sessions. So we have 53 sessions total. And they are just some of the most amazing experts like yourself. And the conversations and sessions have practical tools. And you will come away knowing so much more and having so many more answers, and really being able to say, okay, this is the piece that's been missing for me. This is the piece that's been missing for me. And please share it broadly, widely. When you come in and you fall in love with it, as I know you will, share it with everyone, because really for my 46th year, my dream is that it will reach 46,000 people and help 46,000 women and families. And we've already reached a community of over 16,000. So it's not impossible that we will get there.
Oh, you'll hit it. You'll absolutely hit
Yes.
it. You will change the trajectory of women and the babies to come, the super babies to come. And I mean, you blew me away today. So I can only imagine the information that people are going to get in this summit. I mean, I'm not even childbearing years anymore, but I might listen just to be blown away some more. So
Do that. You will love it.
Seriously.
And your session was incredible. And I know we laugh, we cry, we talk amazing science, we talk amazing reality. How do we apply this in our everyday lives starting today? So yeah, come and experience it. It's really incredible. And thank you for being a part of it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. And thank you for your time today. That means so much that you came on and you just, I mean, really, you blew me away. You blew people away. So thank you for all the research that you've done and for your time and your passion. Your passion just comes through in your voice. So I love you to death. Thank you again.
It's my pleasure. I love you too. And I feel exactly the same way about you, which is why I wanted you there. So thank you for being there and thank you for having me today.